Medford City Council, 14th regular meeting, Medford, Mass., April 11, 2017. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilor Del Russo. Present. Councilor Falco. Present. Councilor Knight. Present. Councilor Arnold Kern. Present. Vice President Marks. Present. Councilor Scarpelli. Present. President Cavriello.
Present. Please rise and salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. 17-326, location of poles, attachment of fixtures, and underground conduits. City Clerk's Office, you are hereby notified by order of the public hearing. The Medford City Council, the public hearing will be given at Howard F. Alden Memorial Auditorium, 85 George P. Hester Drive, City Hall, Medford, Massachusetts, 7:00 p.m. on Tuesday, April 11th, on a petition of National Grid of North Andover for permission to locate poles, fixtures, including the necessary and sustaining protecting fixtures along and across the following public way. Riverside Avenue, National Grid, to install approximately 15 feet of 2 3-inch conduit from existing pole 3162 to proposed MWRA control cabinet for new electrical service. Wherefore, it prays that under the due notice and hearing as provided by law, it be granted a location for permission to erect and maintain poles and wires together with sustaining and protecting fixtures as it may find necessary. Said poles to be erected substantially in accordance with the plan filed herewith marked Riverside Avenue, Medford, Massachusetts, plan number 23114357, approved, city engineer. No city-owned private utilities or other structures are adversely impacted. National Grid will restore damaged pavement loom and seed the landscaped island. Any vegetation disturbed will be replaced in kind. Overall, the contractor shall utilize the City of Medford standards for restoration as well as remove all debris related to his work, approved by the Superintendent of Wires. We open this public hearing. Name and address for the record.
John Jankowski, 170 Medford Street in Malden, Mass. I'm representing National Grid.
And you are in favor of this?
I am.
Do we have anyone else in favor of this? Hearing none and seeing none, that part of the hearing is closed. Do we have anyone in opposition to this? Hearing none and seeing none, that part of the meeting is closed. Councilor Scarpelli.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm reviewing the records, and I see that all of our departments and paperwork are in order to move forward. The questions I have is that there are no double poles involved with this, and
no, not at all. No.
And all the sites are safe and in regulations for the handicap accessibility. And
okay. Actually, for the NWRA, they requested the service, and the MWRA or their contractors will do the digging. They'll put the conduit, they'll pull in the secondary conductor and stuff. So okay. We'll just tap you on the pole.
Okay. I see everything in order. Just off the record, though, on Fulton Street, if there are the questions I had, there's a pole on Fulton Street, right at the corner of Salem and Fulton, and they have it's obviously one of your poles, and it has a cable line that's anchored to the sidewalk, and it's been pulled off of the sidewalk, and that cable is now almost into the street. And there was a cone over the existing hole, okay. But that's been dangling there for weeks. I know that we put something in. If you can look into that, is that the type of, are we going to have that type of construction when we lay these poles in? Are these going fixed in and then being?
No, that's obviously. Okay. Yeah. So that's Salem and Fulton?
Salem and Fulton, right, actually right in front of the oil, I think it's Jiffy Lube, right at the corner. But if you can look at that, Ms. Jankowski, I really appreciate it. And
yep.
I find everything else in order. Thank you, Mr. President.
Motion for approval by Councilor Scarpelli. Yep. Seconded by Councilor Del Russo. All those in favor?
Aye.
Oh, excuse me. Councilor Falco.
One quick question. When will, do we know when the work's taking place?
I would assume I'm not positive. I would assume once this passes, I would think the customer would get started on a week or two, I would assume.
And do we know how long it's going to take?
Oh, it should be 15 feet, so I would think it would be a day. Yeah, it's all going to be done on the grass strip. It's not going to interfere the road itself, which is going to be the grass strip. So,
And if I may, really quick, Councilor Scarpelli brought up a good point about pole. I got a call the other day about a pole at the corner of Fulton Street and Fulton Spring. It was a double pole, and now it's 1.5 poles. They literally cut it in half. It's like a stump.
oh, okay, there's nothing on it.
There's nothing on it. It's about 4 feet off the ground. It's kind of odd. You have one single pole, and there's a pole next to it that was a double pole at one point, and now it's just about 4 feet off the ground. To me, it's a bit of a safety hazard if you have a small child that's walking by or running and trips, and I think it's a problem that needs to be addressed.
I will take a look at it.
Thank you very much. It's a corner of Fulton Street and Fulton Spring Road. Thank you.
Councilor Knight.
Mr. President, the gentleman at the podium answered my question by looking at the diagram. I had a question as to whether or not any street excavation was going to take place and whether or not there was going to be a need for a traffic management plan. He's informed us that it's all going to take place on the grass strip, that it's 15 feet of conduit, that it's going to take 1 day to do. So I have no problem. I would second Councilor Scarpelli's motion for approval.
Thank you, Councilor Knight. On the motion by Councilor Scarpelli, seconded by Councilor Dela Russo. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilor Dela Russo. Yes. Councilor Falco.
Yes.
Councilor Knight.
Yes.
Councilor Long Kern.
Yes.
Vice President Marks. Councilor Scarpelli.
Yes.
President Caviola.
Yes. 6 in the affirmative, 1 absent. The motion passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. President.
Councilor Dela Russo.
Mr. President, I move suspension of the rules to take papers, communication for the mayor, 17-350, 17-351, and 17-352, while we have the pertinent department heads present.
Thank you, Councilor Dela Russo. On the motion of Councilor Dela Russo to suspend the rules, seconded by Councilor Knight. All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Communications from the mayor, 17-350, to the Honorable President and members of Medford City Council, City Hall, Medford, Mass. RE, acceptance of Mass General Laws, Chapter 60, Section 15B. Dear Mr. President, City Councilors, I respectfully move that your honorable body approve the following City of Medford, Massachusetts, acceptance of Mass General Laws, Chapter 60, Section 15B, establishing revolving fund for tax title collection. Be it resolved that the Medford City Council accept the provisions of Mass General Laws, Chapter 60, Section 15B, to allow the city to establish by vote a tax title collection revolving fund for the treasurer collector. Funds collected pursuant to Chapter 60, Section 15B shall include any fees, charges, and costs collected upon the redemption of tax titles and sales of real property acquired through foreclosures and tax titles. Fees, charges, and costs incurred by the treasurer collector may be satisfied through such revolving fund. However, expenditure shall not be made from this revolving fund in excess of the balance of the fund. All interest earned on the tax title collection revolving fund balance shall be treated as general fund revenue. Sincerely, Stephanie M. Burke, Mayor. And Anne Marie Irwin, City Treasurer, will be in attendance for our questions. Name and address for the record, please.
Anne Marie Irwin, Treasurer, City of Medford.
Thank you. If you'd like to explain this, we'd be happy to hear.
I'd be happy to. Mr. President, through you to the members, this is a very straightforward request. It is to establish a revolving fund that will allow fees and costs associated with delinquent tax cases to be put into this fund, and then would be able to pay the costs associated with those cases. It wouldn't be subject to appropriation. It would be pretty much a pass-through account where when we get a bill for our legal fees or our fees from the registry, they would already have been paid by the delinquent taxpayer. We take it out of that account and pay the fees. The Department of Revenue has made a general recommendation that all cities and towns accept this statute. It's a cleaner, more transparent way to see how funds are being expended to recoup tax title funds.
Thank you. Councilor Longo Kern.
Thank you, President Carviallo. If you could explain, I guess, the process we use now, and also, it sounds like our expenses are going to be taken out of this account, and what about properties that are seized or sold? Those money's going to come in, and then we're going to expend from this same account?
So what happens now is, when we pursue a tax title case, taxes, interest, fees, everything, the money has been put forward by the city to pursue those cases, and when the delinquent taxpayer seeks a redemption, they only get a redemption once all those costs have been paid. The taxes under this revolving fund, the taxes and the interest would go into the general fund, and the costs would then come back to the treasurer, who could then use them to pursue other cases. Right now, I have a line item of $3,500 to use toward tax title cases, and just this year, we've already filed 30 cases, and that's $75 per filing fee, so we're up at about $2,500 already. So it doesn't leave a lot of money to pursue some of the larger cases that require filings in land court, et cetera. So with this, when those fees come in, we can build that up and use it going forward.
So this will allow you to money that is brought in from delinquent properties or money owed can then be, we can use more of it towards collecting from other properties versus
Yes.
right now you're limited to the 3,500
Exactly.
and you'd have to ask the mayor's office
Correct.
to appropriate more.
Correct.
So this is a way for us
And this is really
to
being paid back by the delinquent taxpayer. So it's the city getting their money back from the delinquent taxpayer and then using those funds to continue to pursue other delinquent taxpayers.
Now, what if we recouped so much money and this account became obviously extremely high? Where would we be able to transfer out of it?
Well, I'm not certain if you can transfer out of it, but you can close it, which I would assume would then go to the general fund. I don't foresee it really gaining, and growing that much because the fees aren't that great. But if legal fees are being paid by a taxpayer, then we're going to have to pay the legal bill. So it goes in and goes out pretty regularly.
And what's the purpose of DOR recommending this?
I think they think it's cleaner and it's more transparent for cities and towns to show how much money is spent and how much money is recouped through the process.
Thank you.
Councilor Dela Russo.
Mr. President, as one who's always been an advocate and supporter of efficiency in government, and in the pursuit of transparency, I support this resolution and motion for approval.
Thank you, Councilor Dela Russo. Second. Vice President Marks.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Ann, for coming tonight. Do you know what was expended the last 3 years to collect for these tax delinquent properties?
It's been $3,500 on the line item. It's gone into deficit, I'm sure, at some point.
Right, so we don't have an accounting over the last 3 years how much has been expended to collect each and every year? I realize your budget line item.
Right.
Over and above the budget line item.
I can tell you how much has been spent in this year, which is $112,000.
Right, so what I'm trying to do is get a picture of what we've done in the past. Mm-hmm. Have we hired outside, because I assume that part of this money will go to outside attorneys, is that not correct?
Yes, and we have hired outside counsel.
Right. What we've expended in the past, what our percent that we've gained from expending this money. So just say in a given year we expend $100,000 and we get back $300,000 in tax title. Do we have an estimate on every year? What
Yeah,
we've
I
been doing?
can give you a breakdown. Right now, I checked it today. We've
Well, I want to see a few years, not just this year.
Okay, well, I would have to look back. I've only been here for a little over a year, so I would look back. But right now, under Mayor Burke's tenure, we've brought in $2.25 million and spent about $110,000 to do that.
That's great. So I'd like to see a picture, Mr. President, if we could, maybe the last 5 years. What has been, in addition to the line item that was mentioned, what has been expended by the Treasurer Collector's Office and how much money has been taken in for that period of time, so we can get a handle on whether or not we're expending too much money or whether or not we're getting our bang for our buck by hiring these attorneys, and what the practice has been in the past. Has it always been outside attorneys? So maybe if we get a breakdown of what the expenses were too over the past 5 years compared to collections. I, as one member, think that would be helpful to make a decision.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. On the motion by Councilor Dela Russo, is seconded by Councilor Falco. Councilor Longo-Kern.
Just to make sure I completely understand it, I thought any monies recouped would go into this account. So if we have this account open now, and we would have 2.25 million minus the 110,000?
Oh, no, only the cost and fees that we recoup would be in the revolving fund. And then that would give us sort of the seed money to continue prosecuting, not prosecuting, but getting those cases to come to fruition. And the taxes and the interest that we get goes to the general fund.
So the 2.25 million would go to the general fund?
That has already gone to the general fund.
Right, okay.
And that included in that are all of the legal fees, because the delinquent taxpayer pays the legal fee.
Okay. So if this happened next year, 2.25 minus the 112 of costs and fees, 112 would go into this new account, and then the rest would go into the general fund.
Right, provided that those, it's a ballpark, so it's always difficult for the treasurer to know how much needs to be expended to get these monies back. Sometimes it's one letter, and sometimes it's a case in land court. So it's difficult to know how much needs to be expended. And we did spend a lot of time in the beginning looking through the cases and then grouping them into Group A, B, and C. In Group A, we're just finishing those cases up now, and those were the ones that were, if you will, the easier ones, that there were no issues with title or issues with taxpayers no longer living in the city or owning the property. Most of those cases are coming to fruition now. We have a bunch still in land court. And then we're going to move on to Batch B, which are going to be more difficult because they have issues.
And then the $75 filing fee, that's not land court. What is that a filing fee for, you mentioned?
That's, so when the city takes the property, once we send notice and the taxpayer ignores the notice, then we
record the lien.
Yes, and
Gotcha.
we just advertise too, and then we record it.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Vice President Marks.
Thank you. So, Ian, and I'm not sure if you're prepared to answer it tonight, based on the $2 million figure you just gave, is that something that your office has been working on in the past year and a half, or is that something that may have been initiated 3 or 4 years ago that finally went through land court and settled?
No, that was, that's money that has come into the city starting January 4th, 2016 to today. And that has all been a result of the work that our office has done.
So that was work that was tracked down recently within the past year and a half, letters sent and so forth.
When I arrived, there was over I'm going to say $4.2 million out on the street in tax money.
Currently, right now?
No, when I arrived.
You arrived. What do we have in delinquent taxes right now?
We're below $2 million right now.
For the entire city, we're below $2 million? Wow, I thought it'd be much higher than that.
Well, it grows. I mean, we're gonna hit the next quarter, May 1st, and then we're gonna get people who are delinquent then, and we're gonna add new cases to the roll.
Right. And this amount reflects also anyone that is delinquent in their water and sewer, correct?
Water and sewer goes on to when you don't pay your water and sewer bill, that goes on to your real estate bill. It's liened on your real estate bill, and then if you don't pay your real estate.
Do we know what percentage out of that $2 million was water and sewer?
I don't know. I would have to look at that.
Okay. And my last question, back some years ago, well before your time here as treasurer collector, there was a proposal offered by the previous administration to look at a tax amnesty. Where do you stand on tax amnesty?
I'm opposed to a tax amnesty because I believe I see a lot of people who come in and pay their taxes in a timely manner, and they're making sacrifices, and they're not doing all the things that they may want to do, maybe not taking a trip or buying the new car, but they're making sure that their taxes are paid. And I think that those people are doing the right thing by the city, and I think when people choose not to, and I understand there are people who can't, and we work with those people, but when people choose not to pay their tax bills or their water and sewer bills, we still have bills as a city that have to get paid every month. And so to allow people to forego any interest or penalties and come in and pay the tax just doesn't seem fair to me.
So just educate me. If someone is delinquent for years, and just say there are a number of people that are delinquent for years, do we assess the taxes based on those that are delinquent? Like you're saying, geez, we have people that are repeat offenders. They haven't paid their taxes or their water bill in 10 years. Do we take that into consideration when we set our tax numbers and our budget numbers?
Right, because those are accounts receivable that we haven't brought in, that we can't get to come in.
No, but are we charging other taxpayers more money based on the fact that those delinquents aren't paying?
If the delinquency goes on the recap and then those are receivables that we can't get, then yes.
But
I would have to, Alicia would be able to answer that better than me, where the receivables would appear.
If she could, I'd like to get an answer on that.
Name and address of the record, please.
Alicia Dunley, Finance Director, City of Medford. No, they're not directly increased based on those losses, on those people that are not collecting. That's why she's trying to actively do tax title. And we could actually do foreclosures if we felt like going that far.
So we absorb, meaning the city absorbs those delinquents?
Well, they're kept as accounts receivable outstanding. Right. So we're going to keep trying to get them in tax title. And we do have the ability, if we can't recoup that money, to try to take it through foreclosure.
Right. So at what point do we reach out? Is it when the amount of property that's owed or the amount of money that's owed surpasses what the assessed value is? At what time do we go out and start pursuing those legal avenues?
That would be a discussion I would have with the mayor and with the treasurer. I can't give an exact answer on that right now.
So are they ongoing, those discussions?
Well, if I may, we are always, I have a running list of tax title accounts, and I'm always reviewing it and seeing how we can get to these people and get these monies in. It's not something we review once every 6 months. It's a continuing effort on the part of my office to bring that money back to the city.
Okay. And my last question is, based on what we've brought in, you said over $2 million, how many properties does that actually account for? Are we talking one large commercial property? Or are we
No. We
300 smaller properties?
There are probably, I want to say, I had a report the other day. I'm going to say 50-plus properties brought in. I'm going to say probably that's about 60 properties, because we had some that were in litigation and some that resolved short of litigation.
About 60 properties. So I would just ask, Mr. President, that we receive the questions that were asked tonight regarding the 3 or 5 years, which, you know, either one would be fine with me, of number of the amount of money that was requested, not just within the budget, but requested by the treasurer collector to collect on these tax delinquents over the past 3 years. And what percent have we brought in based on those particular years? So if we could see a run and tally for the past 3 years.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Thank you.
On the motion by Councilor Dela Russo, as seconded by Councilor Falco, as amended by Vice President Marks. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilor Dela Russo. Yes. Councilor Falco.
Yes.
Councilor Knight. Yes. Councilor Kern.
Yes.
Vice President Marks. Yes. Councilor Scarpelli.
Yes.
President Caviola.
Yes. 7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Motion passes.
Thank you, councilors.
17-352. To the Honorable President and members of the Medford City Council, City Hall, Medford, Mass. Oh, I'm sorry. 17-351 to the Honorable President, members of the Medford City Council, City Hall, Medford, Mass. Dear Mr. President and City Councils, I respectfully request and recommend that your honorable body approve combining the Water Enterprise Fund and Sewer Enterprise Fund into one enterprise fund per Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53, F1 and 2. To that end, I recommend your approval of the following resolution. Be it resolved that the City of Medford accepts the provisions of Chapter 44, Section 53F, 1 and 2 of the Massachusetts General Laws and combines the Water Enterprise Fund and the Sewer Enterprise Fund into one enterprise fund effective fiscal year 2018. Attached is the combined Water and Sewer Enterprise Funds memorandum that was provided to the Water and Sewer Commission, highlighting the benefits of consolidating the two enterprise funds into one enterprise fund. Also, a letter from the Water and Sewer Commission is provided which demonstrates their support. Finance Director Alicia Nunley is present to answer any questions from the Council regarding this matter. Good evening. Name and address for the record again.
Alicia Nunley, Finance Director, City of Medford. Good evening, Honorable President, Councilors.
Would you explain the...
Absolutely, yes. So what we would like to do is combine the Water and Sewer Enterprise Fund into one enterprise fund for reporting, since everything is under MWRA here. It just makes more sense for reporting to have it all in one fund. Yes, for financial reporting.
Any questions? Councilor Knight.
It's my understanding that this matter has made its way through the Water and Sewer Commission, and that's a recommendation that they've made.
Yes.
Thank you.
Vice President Marks.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, knowing that there's always been a distinction between the water and the sewer accounts through this enterprise account, and also the budgeting is based on, or some of the budgeting is based on what is in with these particular accounts. I was just wondering, what else, maybe if Alicia can specify, why else, other than this makes it easier for accounting, why else would we change over, knowing that, to me, like the budget, having separate budget line items is more accountable than having just one total budget line item when it talks about appropriations and to making sure that money is spent, the taxpayer money is spent appropriately. So what other reasons can you give us for this change?
Well, it's easier also for tracking for expenses. So instead of trying to split it up between how much somebody's working on sewer versus how much somebody's working on water, for recording fixed assets, it's easier for me than to see what I want to attribute to water, what I want to attribute to sewer. We could also break it up within the one fund. It could still have those separate lines showing a water revenue, a sewer revenue. It would just be in one fund. So it wouldn't be necessarily it's one line item. It would still show those differences, but in one fund. Does that make sense?
But if you're still taking the time to account for them within one fund, what's the big cost?
It gives more flexibility as well. So, for instance, when I had to come to you guys in December and I had to get that appropriation to cover the $563,000, I believe, about I was short in the sewer fund, if they were in one fund, if I have a surplus in one and a deficit in the other, I can put them together. I don't have to go forward, and it can clean itself up. And it's all going to MWRA anyway.
Right. What do we have currently within the combined accounts?
Now, when you're saying, are you asking me as far as revenues, or are you asking me as far as expenses?
No, what do we have in the water and sewer enterprise accounts?
That's what I'm saying. Are you asking me as far as money and revenue collections?
Money. What do we have in there for money?
In the sewer account, I have $10,297,330.19.
$10,297,000?
Yep, and in the water fund, I have $8,213,355.33.
And what do we anticipate the surplus to be in these accounts?
I would have actually had to bring that with me from the Water and Sewer Commission. I actually didn't bring that with me. I apologize, but I can provide that to you.
Are we looking at about 8 million, 9 million? Because that's the last figure I heard.
No, that's as much as revenue that's come in. That's not a surplus. That's just revenue that's come in year to date.
This figure, correct?
Yes.
But what do we anticipate to have as a surplus?
That's what I'm saying. I don't have that figure with me. I'd have to get that.
You don't have a ballpark estimate?
I didn't bring that paperwork with me.
It
But
hasn't-
I do have it from when we did the Water and Sewer Commission, when we were looking at rates. We did look at what the projected would be, and I can get that to you.
Mr. President, if I could, this council has requested on several occasions within the past 6 months. One time, we took a unanimous vote, I believe it was, to ask the Water and Sewer Commissioners whether or not they're looking to implement a connectivity fee in water and sewer. And we have yet to get a response. And I know Councilor Longo-Kern asked recently about new construction and having a connectivity fee. But the issue that I brought up several months ago was through a conversation I had regarding the Water and Sewer Commissioners voting on creating what they refer to as a baseline charge. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. Are you familiar with that?
Yes, I am.
As far as I know, Mr. President, the Water and Sewer Commissioners just recently voted to implement a baseline charge to every water and sewer ratepayer in this community. And you can call it a baseline charge, you can call it a connectivity fee, you can call it Mickey Mouse, you can call it whatever you want to call it. What it is a connection charge that they're charging. And I've been told that this baseline charge is going to be roughly about $1.5 million divided among all of our ratepayers in the community that pay water and sewer. And I think it's extremely important now, before we change any accounts or consolidate any accounts, that we get a handle, Mr. President, not only on this paper and the ramifications this paper may have on the accounting and tracking and transparency in this community, but also, Mr. President, on the recent vote by the Water and Sewer Commission on this baseline charge. I think it's extremely important. I would ask my fellow colleagues that we have a committee of the whole meeting with the Water and Sewer Commissioners, Ms. Nunley, and anyone from the Mayor's office to discuss the baseline charge and also discuss this paper, Mr. President, and see if really it provides the benefits that's mentioned, and what impact will the baseline charge have on residents in this community that are already overpaying. We have surplus in the water and sewer enterprise accounts, over $8 million last I remember the surplus account was. And now we're adding what I refer to as another hidden charge that supposedly will eventually be used to offset rates. But I think this council really needs to get a handle on this, Mr. President. And I would respectfully ask my colleagues to lay this on the table for 2 weeks until we have a committee of the whole meeting to discuss this very important baseline issue, which has a lot to do with water and sewer charges on behalf of every ratepayer in this community.
Motion by Councilor Vice President Marks to table this for 2 weeks, seconded by...
The committee of whole meeting.
And do we have a committee of the whole meeting? Seconded by...
Is it okay if I make a comment to you, through you, the chair, to Councilor Marks in regards to the connectivity fee? Councilor Marks, I just wanted to elaborate just a little bit. I was at the Water and Sewer Commission meeting, and the connectivity fee is actually for more of a maintenance fee. We have to give them that service and provide that service to the people to give them the water and the sewer, and the uptake and the upkeep of those pipes. And actually, they need to have that, and that's actually a common theme throughout different cities.
And right now, that's part of what we pay as water and sewer ratepayers. We pay for personnel, we pay for maintenance and upkeep of the infrastructure, and this is in addition. So we've been providing these services all along, and I don't buy the fact that this is now going to be used for upkeep of the system. Who's been upkeeping the system? We, the ratepayers, have been.
It's correct? A part of upkeep, and the administration and the people that are going out and tracking, that are maintaining, that's a part of it. But we do have the paperwork that shows the need for the fee. That's included.
I'm not doubting that, but I think this council should be privy when everyone gets their water bill, and they're going to be billed, by the way, just so you know, it's depending on the size of the pipe that comes into your home, and they're going to be billed every pay period. So residential homeowners could be seeing an additional $25 or $30 every pay period that's listed on their bill as a baseline charge. So these are the things, Mr. President, I think that we have to discuss, because we should be the first to know about when residents call us and say, hey, what's this? And believe me, they will. What's this additional $30 that I'm seeing on my bill? And then we're going to have to explain, well, ma'am, that is for infrastructure or maintenance. Well, why do you have $8 million surplus? What's that for? So these are the questions I think we need answered. I'm not saying it's not a bad idea or a good idea. I'm saying it deserves deliberation and dialogue, Mr. President, and we should be in the loop. Did anyone know about this baseline charge? Anybody know about this? 7 councilors? No one knew about it. That's a good question. When is it starting? It was approved by the Water and Sewer Commissioners. I don't know when it starts, and that's a good question. So these are the questions, Mr. President. I don't think we should be quick to act on anything tonight and get some answers.
On the motion by
Mr. President,
the table
please.
by Councilor Marks.
Mr. President.
Councilor Marks has the floor.
Point of order, Mr. President.
Do you yield,
Councilor Marks
Councilor
has the
Marks?
floor.
Do you yield?
I yield to the gentleman, Mr. President.
Point of order, Mr. President.
Name and address for the record, please.
Mr. President, John Storella, 20 Metcalf Street.
Excuse me. Councilor Dela Russo, point of order.
Mr. President, he cannot speak. There has been a motion made to table.
The council has...
Have you read Robert's Rules of Debate?
Councilor Dela Russo has asked for a...
He cannot do it. According to the
Councilor
rules of debate, he cannot speak, and neither can Councilor Marks. Nobody here can speak. Once a motion is made to table, there is, all debate is closed, and, and a vote must be taken immediately, and it's not even necessary to second. Now, you should follow the rules.
Councilor Dela Russo.
Mr. President, it was my intention, with all due respect, to kindly point out that there was a motion to table on the floor, which ended debate, yet we continued on in debate, and I wanted to kindly and respectfully point that out.
Thank you.
And hope that we can take a vote on this or dispose of the matter.
On the motion by Councilor Marks, the table for 2 weeks.
Mr. President, if the gentleman would like to speak, I'll withdraw my motion, and then I'll, if Mr.
Do you want to withdraw your motion?
I'll withdraw my motion so Mr.
Councilor Marks
Stroller
has
can
withdrawn
speak.
his motion. Name
May
and
I
address for the
speak
record.
as a member of this body, Mr. President?
Mr. President, the motion has been made.
Councilor Marks has withdrawn his motion.
Well, if you withdraw your...
He's withdrawn his
Allow
motion.
you to speak, John. You want to speak or no? Do you want to speak?
Yes, I do. I am speaking.
Yes. He withdrew his motion so you can speak.
Please, no interruptions. Now, a motion has been made to table. Debate has to be closed immediately. None of the councilors can speak. A second is not needed. You should have a copy of Robert's Rules here, and a vote should be taken immediately. It either is tabled or it is not tabled.
Point of information, Councilor Knight.
Section 17 of Robert's Rules of Order would say, to lay a matter on the table, you move to lay a question on the table. A second is required.
Thank you, Councilor Knight. Councilor Marks, do you want to...
I think Councilor Del Russo.
Since the motion to table has been removed, I have a couple things I'd like to point out and a question through the chair to Ms. Nunley. First, I'd like to say that in recent years, we have not seen such activity, research, seriousness, and sophistication from the Water and Sewer Commission, and we should be grateful for that and for their efforts. It would be helpful for us to have some information from them regarding what has been presented by my colleague as some sort of service fee, an additional fee, and I can only speculate at what that might be directed towards, but I won't do that out loud, Mr. President. I would like to request kindly, because what seems to me is this, the question isn't, it doesn't necessitate or prevent us from addressing a very pertinent issue which my colleague has brought up, a very serious issue that we need to address as a body, and I agree. However, we're dealing with what seems to me to be an accounting issue here. How do we keep the books? What style do we use? I can only imagine that when this water and sewer enterprise account was initiated some many decades ago, that it was a style of accounting that might not be in practice today to have them divided. Yet, they will, on the books, appear separately. The money will just be in one pot, if I understand correctly. So, through the chair to Ms. Nunley, if I could ask, is there precedent for this? Is there a new guideline that has come out from the Commonwealth? Is this a practice that is being adopted by cities and towns who have a water and sewer enterprise account?
Through the chair, Councilor Del Russo, yes, Winchester actually has a combined water and sewer fund, and it is permissible to combine it. It is correct, and just an accounting reporting, yes, there would still be separate lines within the one fund.
Thank you very much. Mr. President, I have no problem with this, matter before us as far as seeking permission, because we are the authorizing body, obviously, to address this matter of bookkeeping, and account keeping. It in no ways, in my opinion, abdicates or minimizes the matter that my colleague brought up, which we should have clear and significant conversation with the Water and Sewer Commission about, especially as we're entering the budget season. So I move approval, Mr. President.
On the motion by Councilor Del Russo, Councilor Knight.
Mr. President, thank you very much. Ms. Nunley, in reading the memorandum that you put together for the Water and Sewer Commission, it explains a little bit about a lot of duplication of efforts that your office performs now because you have these two separate funds. Could you go into that a little bit for me and make me understand it a little bit better, please?
Sure. So as far as personnel is concerned, we have to split them between the two for reporting. And if I had it in one fund, if they were working on the enterprise fund, they could be 100% just charged the enterprise fund instead of trying to figure out, okay, they're spending 60% of their time doing sewer work, they're spending 40% of their time doing water, then trying to split out their benefits. The different liens, when we're billing liens, we can now just put it in one fund instead of having to, put liens into two separate items. It makes it a lot easier, a lot cleaner.
And that's in terms of operations and in terms of administration?
Yes.
Thank you very much, Ms. Nunley.
Very welcome.
Thank you. Vice President Marks.
As I stated originally, I'm not opposed to this, Mr. President. They're asking for a consolidation of accounts. I'm not saying whether it's a good or bad idea. The issue that I brought up regarding the baseline charge, where this money actually goes into these accounts, I think is only appropriate at the time that we look at both, Mr. President. It only makes sense to me to review both issues. This is an accounting issue or a bookkeeping issue. If it's such a simple issue, why hasn't the administration been before us in the past 25 years saying, how do we simplify this? And it's great that you're taking the initiative, if it was you or if it came from the mayor, who knows. But I'm glad to see them streamlining, Mr. President. But there's no rush to do this, Mr. President. This is how it existed for 25 years in this community. And waiting 2 weeks to sit down with all the interested parties and find out about this paper and also about the baseline charge, I think is prudent government, Mr. President. And I will support tabling the issue, Mr. President, and ask for a roll call vote on the table, and that we meet within 2 weeks as a committee of the whole.
On the motion by Councilor Marks to table this for 2 weeks, seconded by Councilor Longo-Kern. All those in favor?
Aye.
The chair seems to be in doubt. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilor Del Russo. No. Councilor Falco.
Yes.
Councilor Knight.
Yes.
Councilor Longo-Kern.
Yes.
Vice President Marks.
Yes.
Councilor Scarpelli.
Yes.
President Caviola.
Yes. One in the affirmative. One in the 6 in the negative. 6 in the affirmative. 1 in the negative. Motion passes. I will do my best to get this done in the next 2 weeks, Vice President Marks. We may have to do it on a Wednesday or Monday night.
We just took a vote, right? So
because a lot of the Tuesdays are already full up until the end of the month.
Point of personal interjection.
Councilor Del Russo.
While the matter previously before us is closed, and while this has no parliamentary route whatever, I'll just kindly point out that for 25 years, people have been complaining about the way the books have been kept. I'm delighted we're having an update.
Thank you.
What a personal privilege, Mr. President.
Vice President Miles.
Well, considering my fellow colleague has never spoken on the issue and has yet to recognize the taxpayers of this community, I feel it's only appropriate, Mr. President, as an elected official in this community, to make sure each and every ratepayer is heard. And that's what we did tonight, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Vice President. 17352, to the Honorable President and members of the Medford City Council, City Hall, Medford, Mass. Dear Mr. President and Councilors, I respectfully request and recommend that your honorable body confirm appointments to the Community Preservation Committee as follows. Joan Sear, 2-year term. Roberta Cameron, 3-year term. Elizabeth Kerry Sewell, 1-year term. Joseph Pecora, 1-year term. Copies of their resumes have been provided in our package. Additionally, please be advised that in accordance with the Massachusetts General Law relating to the Community Preservation Committee, the following boards have voted and appointed Heidi Davis from the Conservation Commission, a 3-year term. David Fields from the Community Development Board to a 3-year term. Doug Carr from the Historical Commission for a 2-year term. Michael Cunyo, Park Commission, 2-year term. Michael Lewis, Housing Authority, 1-year term. Since the vote of the Community Development Board, Mr. Fields has been offered and accepted an appointment in the Office of Community Development. The matter of vote for a new designee to the Community Preservation Committee will be held at the earliest date possible. Thank you. So, Mr. Fields' name has been withdrawn from the Community Development Board. Sincerely, Stephanie M. Burke, Mayor. Councilor Knight.
Mr. President, thank you very much. In recent weeks, this council has requested that the administration provide us with a list of her appointments to the Community Preservation Commission, which is a function of the Community Preservation Act that was passed last November by the voters in this community. As we go through the list here and we see the individuals that have been appointed by the administration, 4 of these individuals are voluntary, 5 are statutory, Mr. President, and the council does have the power to approve the appointees that the mayor has put forward. In reviewing the resumes that are attached and looking at the voluntary appointments that the mayor has put forward, we see Joan Sear from 40 Cedar Road, appointed to a 2-year term. Joan served on the CPA ad hoc subcommittee that helped craft the CPA language, the CPA ordinance here in our community, and she's someone who I think did a great job. Also, she was instrumental in getting the Community Preservation Act passed here in the community. We also have she also has a background in project management, Mr. President. Then we see Roberta Cameron from North Street, also recommended for a 3-year term. Roberta was also a member of the ad hoc committee that helped put together the ordinance that's been adopted by this council, and she has a long background in community planning. The other two appointees that are before us this evening are Elizabeth Kerry Sewell from Douglas Road, appointed to a 1-year term, and she has a very long and extensive history in landscape architecture, Mr. President. And then we have Joseph Pecora, a resident from Adams Street, appointed to a 1-year term, who is a real estate professional. If we look at the Community Preservation Act and we see that there are certain aspects of the act that it's focused on, preservation of open space, the creation of affordable housing, the maintaining of our historic landmarks, Mr. President. I think that the administration's done a great job in going through the applicants and presenting us with a group of, or a team, I should say, of individuals that will move the city in the right direction. So with that being said, I just wanted to have a brief moment to go over the individuals that were appointed, Mr. President. I'm comfortable this evening voting on them. However, I'd open the floor up to deliberation to my council colleagues to see how they feel as though they'd like to proceed.
Thank you, Councilor Knight. Councilor Del Russo.
Mr. President, I first of all want to thank Councilor Knight for his hard work in bringing us to this point, and I want to second the motion for approval of the slate of these fine and highly qualified individuals who will be deciding how to spend the taxpayers' money.
Thank you, Councilor Del Russo. And I also want to commend the committee for the amount of work that it took to get this from nothing up to this whole, to where it is right now. They did an outstanding job, and they should be commended. Councilor Falco.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to also mention that, you know, a number of these, I worked with a number of these people when we put this committee together, and I know for one, Joan Sierra and Roberta Cameron, they were extremely knowledgeable and instrumental in passing this, and you know, in building the city ordinance. And I thank them for their commitment. This is going to be a really, I think it's going to be a tough commission to be on, but I think they're up to the challenge. They're both smart, knowledgeable people, and I think they'll do a great job. So
Thank you. Councilor Scarpelli.
Thank you, Mr. President. I too echo my fellow councilors' remarks. I know that how much time we put into this process, and especially Joan and Roberta, who have been directly involved. But I feel that the diversity and the different backgrounds in all of our appointees will lead us in making great choices for our community moving forward. So I applaud our representation and move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Name and address for the record, please.
John Sorella, 20 Metcalf Street. Mr. President, I would respectfully urge this council to table this motion, and I'll tell you why. What we're doing here is appointing 9 people to this preservation committee. Now, all of the taxpayers are going to pay this surtax. This really is a surtax on the property tax, which, by the way, has a limitation. But this is not subject. This exceeds the limitation. That's illegal, but they're doing it anyway. But the point I want to make is that when you look at these lists of people, and it doesn't matter if someone was instrumental or not in passing it, that's history. What matters is who's on this preservation committee. Now, we have 8 wards in this city. Don't you think all of those taxpayers should be represented? We have 9 appointments here.
Point of clarification, Councilor Knight.
When the ordinance was crafted, there's language that's included in the ordinance that says that the appointees that are put forward by the mayor will do their best to represent all geographic areas of the community. And if we look at the individuals who have been appointed and where they live, we will see that the appointees that are before the city council are spread out and relatively decently across the community in separate wards, Mr. President.
I beg to differ, Councilor. Half of the wards are not represented. We have 16 precincts. Half of those precincts are not represented. These also pay taxes.
Point of clarification, Councilor Knight.
I never made a reference to a ward or a precinct. I made reference to a geographic area, which is what the ordinance speaks to.
Thank you, Councilor Knight.
We vote by wards, and these people are all taxpayers, and they're in the wards. If you look at this list of 9 people, half of them are from West Medford or from borderline areas of the city close to West Medford. Now, that is not the way to do it in an equitable way. What we should do is give everybody representation. I think a new list should be offered, and we should have representation throughout the city. That way, a taxpayer will feel that the people on this committee are offering solutions that will also benefit his particular area of the city. And it should be so. All areas should be benefited equally. And when you have a group of 9 people, and maybe 6 of them come from West Medford or West Medford contiguous areas, that simply is not fair. That's the reason I am urging a table on this motion and requesting the mayor to submit another list that applies to all the people of the city and is more democratic. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Storella. Name and address on the record, please.
Thank you, Council President Andrew Castanetti, Cushing Street, Medford, Massachusetts. I'm not going to get into the West Medford and South Medford or East Ford, although Dr. Sorella may have brought up some reasonable points. However, I would like to say the implication that Mr. Sorella made was it was in effect an override of Prop 2.5. In effect, we could say that, but it really wasn't. It was under the Massachusetts law of the Community Preservation Act, I believe. However, I'd say when it was voted in by however it was voted in, and that's kind of an understatement of how it got approved. I just wanted to say, if I had input to what to use this $1.5 million, if that's what it is, the first thing I would do is, they talk about Chevalier Auditorium as being the crown jewel of the city. However, as you pull into Medford Square from the Rotary, Route 93, Interstate Route 93, on Salem Street, as you're going past the old Medford Cinema, which is now Elizabeth Grady, and on the right-hand side there, after that church is, I believe it's Martin Pastry, or Mike's, I think it's Martin. However, that steeple has not been there since I was shooting pool at Joe's Pool Room back in '68. I would think maybe it's not a crown jewel that's missing, but at least put, as they say in a Christmas tree, a finial on top of that steeple. It doesn't have to be a full blown out structure, because it might come down with another windstorm or hurricane and get condemned. It could be a reasonable facsimile that goes up 20, 30, 40 feet, made of some sort of carbon or a plastic material. At least the center of the square will look a little bit more with a cap on top. Make a better presentation to the outsiders and also to myself as I'm driving my bicycle around City Hall. I think it's a no-brainer. People might think it's not important, but I think it would make a big presentation. I would thank you for listening.
The money gets appropriated into several different categories. So all the money does not get spent in one particular area. There's different categories where it's a...
Yes, I understand. One of the major parts of it, if I recollect, is architecture and housing, I believe. But talk about architecture. Historical Society should have been on that one 25 years ago. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Councilor Longo-Kern.
Thank you, President Carviello. I just wanted to go back and review which sections of the city that everybody that lives in, because I agree with the language, with the way the ordinance was drafted. I also agree with what Dr. Estrella had mentioned. We want every geographic location represented, and I know to do that would almost be close to impossible because we don't have enough nominees. But if you do look at it, you have 4 appointments from the mayor, which, we do have the resumes attached tonight. They're all very good resumes. 2 are up in the Heights, which everybody spoke about, Joan and Roberta. And then 2 are from the Hillside. And then with regards to the appointees that are picked by the commissions, you do have 2 West Medford, 1 South, 1 Wellington. I think there's another West that was pulled because he's been hired by the OCD to work in City Hall. And then there are, I think, another commissioner or 2 that are voting on their member this week. So it's pretty well, I always like to look at that myself, and it is pretty well represented. So we have North, Wellington, West, South, and the Hillside. I think we've covered, everything with the 8 nominees that we're voting on tonight, and I just wanted to point that out for the public.
Thank you, Councilor Longo. Vice President Marks.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I agree with all my colleagues. I think we have a great list of candidates that were presented by the mayor. The one difference I do have, Mr. President, is, and I'm not sure about the new councilors, but it's been past practice of this council that for any appointments, whether it's a confirmation of the mayor's appointment or our own appointment, which we don't have many of, we've always requested that the person appear before the council so we can thoroughly vet them out. And even before that, Mr. President, dating back some 8 to 10 years ago, we used to have committee of the whole meetings and subcommittee meetings to interview. I remember sitting across the table asking people questions on why they want the appointment, what do they plan on doing, what do you see the position as. So you can get a feel of the person, Mr. President. It's great we got the resumes, and I know many of these people, so this is not a dig on who applied and so forth. I think we have to be consistent, Mr. President. We all talk about transparency, and I think we have to be consistent. If I'm going to request that someone on the liquor board or someone on the community development board appear before us for confirmation, then you better believe any other confirmations should appear before us, Mr. President. This council has been great over the last several years. In particular, we have voted to tighten up our rules and regulations. We no longer waive third readings, which does away with the public right to come up when we enact an ordinance, and the third reading would allow them to come up and stand before the council. And we used to waive that. We no longer waive that, Mr. President. When we voted for council president and vice president, there's a conflict, an inherent conflict, because the council president and vice president used to vote on their own pay raise. And that's not me saying it. That's the Ethics Commission saying there's a conflict of interest on voting on anything that you have a monetary gain to. And we no longer do that, Mr. President, if you look at the way we handle our process. All I would ask, Mr. President, no one wants to stall, no one wants to remove these people. Give them the same opportunity to appear before us, and let the council ask questions and thoroughly vet them out, Mr. President, not only for this council, but for the purview of the people watching at home, Mr. President, and the purview of transparency, Mr. President. So that's what I would offer tonight. Let's invite them up before us. This has been a long process. Councilor Knight and other councilors have done yeoman's work in pushing this forward to get to this point. And I don't think vetting these candidates out, which will have the purse strings of every taxpayer. There is a check and balance. We end up voting on it, but they make the recommendation to the council. And, you know, they do have the purse strings, you know, and I think at the very least we have to do our due diligence. The mayor might have done hers, and we have to do ours, Mr. President. So I would respectfully ask that this be laid on the table, Mr. President, until all the nominees appear before the council for proper vetting.
Would you like that done by next week, if possible?
As soon as we can get it scheduled, Mr. President.
Okay. On the motion by Vice President Marks that we lay this on the table until we can get everybody here to confirm them personally, seconded by?
Yes, a council meeting.
Seconded by? Seconded by? Seconded by Councilor Kern. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Councilor Del Russo and Councilor Knight are in opposition. There will be 5 in the affirmative, 2 in the negative. Motion by Councilor Scarpelli to revert back to regular business. All those in favor? Motion passes. Motions, orders, and resolutions. 17344, offered by Vice President Marks. Be it resolved that the city's information technology strategic plan be discussed. Councilor Marks. Vice President Marks.
Thank you, President Carviello. It was back in July 2016, the mayor came out with the City of Medford Information Technology Strategic Plan, and that was plan was supposed to take place from 2016 to 2018. And they were going to upgrade many of the computer systems at City Hall, which I think Microsoft Office was back in 2001 that they were using here at City Hall. Needless to say, the systems were very outdated. They looked into a new phone system, which I believe they have currently on board. And coupled with that, Mr. President, this new initiative was also to train employees that were used to working on outdated and archaic systems on the latest and greatest of technology. And as part of the proposal, Mr. President, and that's why I offer this tonight, is there was a section for open government. And it stated the city is in the process of studying the use of social networking for providing all city residents equal and timely access to information. I have yet to see that, Mr. President. Maybe there is something in the works, but I can tell you right now, there's no social networking going on here at City Hall. And there's no community outreach as far as I can see from City Hall. Other than, Mr. President, maybe an inundation of reverse 911 And maybe, Mr. President, that we're still using wooden A-frame boards. There's one on Main Street in front of Dunkin' Donuts, alerting people that they're doing street sweeping. I mean, the A-frame boards we used back in the Depression, Mr. President, when people that were jobless were walking around with A-frame signs. And we're still using them in the city of Medford now to let residents know what is going on in the community. So one thing, Mr. President, I want to find out what the social networking that opens it up to every city resident. You know, I got a call last week. There's going to be street sweeping. I said, this is great. They're alerting me when there's street sweeping. Go onto the city website, you'll find out. Why call, Mr. President? Why call residents to let them know there's street sweeping if you're not going to tell me when the street sweeping is? And the system has the ability and the capability of alerting residents by ward, precinct, street, address. It has all sorts of capability, and the city's not using it. I finally got a call tonight saying there's street sweeping in my neighborhood I think it's Wednesday or Thursday, to move the cars. So that's my first question, Mr. President. Where do we stand with the study that was proposed under the Mayor's Information Technology Strategic Plan on social networking? And the second one was customer service. And it states information technology is studying the use of payments via the internet. Wow, that's unbelievable. Imagine that. We just got call waiting on the phones. So now you can call and leave a message. That must have been a new creation. And now we're going to have the ability to make payments over the internet. Imagine if Amazon couldn't make payments over the internet. What do they do? Carry a pigeon? Is that how they deliver the money? So, Mr. President, it's great to put this stuff out. It sounds great. You know, when you read it, open government, customer service. We still have a see-click-fix program that's not working. Anytime we ask for the administration to give us the statistics and reports on it, we get no results from it. And as far as I'm concerned, it's a complete and utter failure, that see-click-fix. And, you know, the mayor's talking about automatic transfers of payments and so forth. Has that happened yet, Mr. President? It's been a year and 4 months. It's been 16 months now. Has that happened yet? So those are my questions, Mr. President, regarding social networking and where we stand with payment via the internet on this particular item that was offered by the mayor back in 2016.
Thank you. I can say that I do see Facebook things coming from different departments here in the city, so I know they do some networking. Councilor Falco.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to, while we're on the topic of information technology, budget season will be upon us soon. So I'd like to, if I could amend the resolution just to see if we could get a report from the technology department here at City Hall to find out basically what new software has been purchased this year and what is being planned for next year.
Thank you,
and if we can get an update as to as far as the current software that we're using, what version of software we're using. I mean, we're in the 21st century here. Our software should be fairly up to date. And I know last year during the budget hearings, we were lacking. And I want to see what type of progress we made. And it's important to find out before we actually go into budget hearings. So, thank you.
Thank you. And if I could amend that to ask, if I can recall, I thought we had hired a second person in the IT department. I haven't seen that second person in the office there. They hired? I haven't seen anyone in there, so I don't know if that person has ever been hired.
Don't we get correspondence from any new employees?
I don't have any correspondence, so I can't say. On the motion by Councilor Marks. Seconded by.
Roll call vote, Mr. President.
On the motion by Councilor Marks, seconded by. Seconded by Councilor Falco. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilor Del Russo? Yes. Councilor Falco?
Yes.
Councilor Knight? No. Councilor Kern?
Yes.
Vice President Marks?
Yes.
Councilor Scarpelli?
Yes. President
Caraviallo?
Yes. 6 in the affirmative, 1 in the negative, and motion passes. 17, 345, offered by Councilor Falco. Whereas the increased amount of traffic and speeding poses a major public safety concern, be it resolved that the Chief of Police increase patrols on Harvard Avenue to monitor the speed of vehicles. Councilor Falco.
Thank you, Mr. President. This issue came up last week during the community police meeting at the West Medford Community Center. During that time, there was a lot of discussion regarding the traffic on Harvard Ave, and it seems like this has become a definite quality of life issue where it's getting to the point where it's really tough to even cross the street. The traffic is heavier, it's quicker, it's faster. So this is just basically if we could contact the Chief of Police, have him increase the patrols in that area, and if we could also have the portable radar unit put down there as well to monitor traffic and speed to protect the residents in that neighborhood.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Knight.
I'd like to amend the resolution, Mr. President, and request that Arlington Street be included.
Mr. Clerk, if you could amend the resolution to add Arlington Street to that also. Vice President Marks.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank Councilor Falco first for providing a forum for people throughout the neighborhood to discuss issues of concern. I think it's been very successful. Mr. President, I'm going to once again ask, I think this is my 5th time that this council has voted on. We were promised as residents of this community that we would have a pilot program with 3 raised crosswalks. Remember the issue about pedestrian safety that's been around for years? Remember the issues of speeding cars? We resolved this issue, or thought we were resolving part of the issue, by implementing a pilot program back I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, under the McGlynn administration. We carried out 1 of the 3 on Winthrop Street, which, by the way, needs to be painted. You can't even see it. You go over it, it's like hitting just a giant hurdle.
Yes.
But, Mr. President, we were promised the Winthrop Street, which happened, Harvard Street, which is a very dangerous road and highly trafficked, and Central Ave, another long stretch that residents complain about quite frequently. I receive complaints, Mr. President. And I've sent this administration several requests. Where do we stand, Mr. President? And if you can find a paper that responds to that request, I'll be a monkey's uncle. Okay? If you can find that paper, Mr. President, that talks with public safety. You know, the mayor's preaching complete streets, we're doing this and that. What about the basics, Madam Mayor, that we've already spoke about? Go to Ring Road back here, Mr. President. Remember we installed back some 8 years ago the crosswalk that blinks for $50,000? We could have thermoplastic the whole city for $50,000, as you mentioned. Now go by it, Mr. President. All the blinkers in the street were torn up. Go by it. There's all holes with no more blinkers in the street. We just spent $50,000 for that crosswalk, and it's gone, Mr. President. You know, and you have the mayor touting about complete streets. You know, it just doesn't make any sense, Mr. President, that when you talk public safety issues and you expect results, or at least expect follow-up, you get no response from this administration. No response at all, Mr. President. And I want to say it's 4 or 5 direct votes. I know I offered them personally that were voted on by this council, and we have yet to get a request on where we stand with the raised crosswalks. The residents in those areas that were told, I just had a gentleman the other day at Stop and Shop say to me, when are we getting our raised crosswalk on Central Ave? And I said, your guess is as good as mine. I've asked a dozen times, and honestly, I'm getting tired of asking the same question over and over again, Mr. President. So once again, I would ask my colleague if I can amend his paper. Once again, we'll send the paper to the mayor and ask where are the other 2 raised crosswalks that were promised to this community? When are we going to see them implemented in the interest of public safety?
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Councilor Falco.
If I may, Mr. President, another issue did come up during the meeting. A number of issues came up. It was actually a very productive meeting. Great conversation, but a number of issues. But speed did come up, and the point that Councilor Marks had made earlier in the year about lowering the speed limit to 25 that we all voted for. And it was a great resolution and something that we all supported. The question was, when are those 25-mile-per-hour signs coming in? And from what I'm hearing, they haven't been procured yet. So if we could get an update as to when they're going to be procured and installed, That'd be great. Spring is here, and as we know, people, tend to get out and drive, and there's a lot more people walking around. So I think it's in everybody's best interest that we get those signs installed as soon as possible. So if we could get an update on that, greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Falco. Councilor Knight.
I'd also like to further amend the paper, Mr. President, and request that Tufts University be contacted, and that we request they take the appropriate steps to properly improve the visibility of the raised crosswalk that they have on Boston Ave. It's like Mount Everest. You come up the hill on it, and you can't even see that it's there, Mr. President. I've witnessed cars going at a normal and acceptable rate of speed, still bottom out on it because of the size of it, Mr. President. So I think that we might need to do a little bit better work over there in denoting the fact that there is a raised crosswalk on the street on Boston Avenue right before the old post office.
Thank you. On the motion by Councilor Falco, as amended by Vice President Marks and Councilor Knight, do I have a second? Second, Mr. President. Seconded by Councilor Della Russo. All those in favor? 7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Motion passes. 17-346, offered by Councilor Falco, be it resolved that the Medford City Council congratulate the Medford Middle School String Ensemble under the direction of Sophia Chang for winning the silver medal at the Massachusetts Instrumental Chorus Conductors Association Band and Orchestra Festival. Be it further resolved that they be invited to a future meeting to accept commendations. Councilor Falco.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to say congratulations to the middle school orchestra. They're an amazing bunch of kids, and they won a silver medal this year. The music is just amazing when you hear it. It'd be great if they could come down. I know when I was in the school committee, they came down to a number of meetings and played before us. Ms. Chang does a fabulous job with the children. When you listen to them, it's hard to believe that it's actually young kids playing. They sound fabulous. And, since they've actually had this competition and did a research here, there's over 160 ensembles that are part of this. And over the 8 years that Medford has been involved, they've won 6 gold and 2 silver. So I think that's pretty impressive, and I just wanted to say congratulations.
Thank you. We'll have them up here. Whenever you invite them up here, we'll get that done. On the motion by Councilor Falco, seconded by Councilor Scarpelli. All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes 7-0. 17-347, offered by Councilor Falco, be it resolved that the Medford High School Drama Club be congratulated on their outstanding performances of Pippin last weekend. Be it further resolved that Director Sarah Grant be recognized for working with the students to prepare them for this production. Councilor Falco.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to say my son Joey and I had the opportunity to go to the opening night performance this past week. The students did a fabulous job with Pippin, and Ms. Sarah Grant, as always, first-class production. And just wanted to say congratulations to everyone involved. It was a great show. They did a great job. Thank you.
On the motion by Councilor Falco, as seconded by Councilor Lundgren Kern. All those in favor? Aye. 7-0, motion passes. Motion by Councilor Knight to take hands in the paper by the clerk. Seconded by Councilor Scarpelli. 17-353, offered by Councilor Knight. Be it resolved that the engineering department report to the council the status and necessary for service interruption of electricity on Harvard Avenue and what notification systems are in place to inform the affected residents of status thereof. Councilor Knight.
Mr. President, thank you very much. I filed this resolution in response to some frustration that the neighbors had in the area relative to advertised power outages that never happened, Mr. President. So last week, residents were notified that the power would be out in the evening hours between 8 and 10 p.m. Power never went out. 2 days later, residents are notified the power is going to go out between certain hours. The power never goes out. 3 days later, residents are notified the power is going to go out during certain hours. the power never goes out, Mr. President. So I'm wondering what the situation is on Harvard Avenue and what notification systems are in place to inform the residents, number one, if their power is going to be shut off, but number two, if they're not going to do the scheduled and performed work, so that individuals that may have made dinner plans to go out that night as opposed to staying home and opening their refrigerator back and forth to let the freeze and cold air out, would be in a little bit of a situation, Mr. President. So I raised the issue based out of real frustration on behalf of the neighborhood residents, especially those residing in the condominium on Harvard Avenue that were notified multiple times. And
should we contact National Grid?
Dan Cameron is the individual, and I've placed a phone call into him, Mr. President, but I'd like to ask that we send this to the engineering department for an update, and I'll make my phone calls to Mr. Cameron, and hopefully I can get an answer.
Thank you.
Personally.
On the motion by Councilor Knight, seconded by Councilor Falco. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. 17-354, offered by Councilor Knight, be it resolved that the code enforcement officer meet the entity located at 186 Winthrop Street, doing business as Stone and Skillet on the ongoing violations of city ordinances related to the hours of operation, parking, and neighborhood concerns related to the cleanliness. Councilor Knight.
Yes, Mr. President, this has been an ongoing issue in the community for quite some time now. I feel like every 90 days I'm making a phone call to code enforcement or the Board of Health to go down and take a look at Stone and Skillet and what's going on. Now, don't get me wrong, Stone and Skillet's a great business, and they're doing a great business, and they've absolutely outgrown the location that they're currently located at. If you aren't familiar, Stone and Skillet right now is located at the old Marty's for Parties, the old Pranzi's location, right on Winthrop Street on the corner of Winthrop and West Street, Mr. President. And in past months, we've seen 18-wheelers double parking on Winthrop Street to load up the truck with product from Stone and Skillet. We've seen grease trap problems and Board of Health issues that have been rectified in the past. We've seen rodent problems because of the Board of Health issues in the past, Mr. President. And quite frankly, the neighborhood's a little bit frustrated with it, and they've had enough. I had the opportunity last Thursday evening at 1 a.m. with a screaming child in the backseat of my car to drive by Stone and Skillet and see that all the lights were on. The place looked like a nightclub. And that's something that's not suitable or appropriate for a residential neighborhood, Mr. President. So I'm asking that the code enforcement officer go down and meet with the individuals that operate Stone and Skillet and reiterate the city ordinances that are in place and, if need be, levy citation. It's also been brought to my attention, Mr. President, that at that location there were late hours when Pranzi's was there. And any special permit or any approval that the City Council issued relative to late hours should really go with that business, Pranzi's, and not a muffin wholesaler that's operating through all hours of the night that's really far outgrown its location, Mr. President. We're seeing legitimate 18-wheelers parked on the corner of West Street, legitimate 18-wheelers parked right in front of Molten Seafood in the address 186 Winthrop Street during rush hour, normal business hours, blocking the street. It's gotten to the point of frustration that something needs to happen sooner rather than later. I'd like to thank Ms. O'Connor at the Board of Health and Mr. Bavuso in Code Enforcement because they've been working with me for the past year on this issue. And I've spoken with them both relative to the filing of this resolution. It's time that something happens down there, Mr. President. So I'm asking that my colleagues support this initiative.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Del Russo.
Just by way of point of information, Mr. President, if I remember correctly, the extended operation hours to the previous occupant of that property were indeed restricted to that occupant and not to the location. I think this council has consistently adopted the policy of doing such with any of those applications.
On the motion by Councilor Knight, seconded by Councilor Del Russo. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
While we're on suspension?
We have one more, Councilor Knight. While we're on suspension. Actually, we have one more. Offered by President Caraviello, be it resolved that the Medford City Council requests that the DPW clean the rear parking lot of City Hall as there's garbage bags and litter that is piled by the melting snowbank.
Move approval.
I don't know if anyone's looked out the back window here.
Across the street too.
Yeah, I was.
Third world.
Yes, it looks very bad. If the DPW can take care of that immediately, it would be greatly appreciated.
Mr. President, just while we're on suspension.
While we're under suspension, Councilor Marks, Vice President Marks. Motion.
I moved approval, Mr. Councilor.
Motion by Councilor Dela Russo, seconded by Councilor Knight. All those in favor? Motion passes. Vice President Marks.
Just if I could, Mr. President, a public announcement, a very worthy cause. On April 13th at the Malden Irish American, they're having the first annual music bingo fundraiser. The Volk alumni put this together in the hopes and anticipation to raise some funding, as we heard from Ms. Riccio, that was Director Riccio, that was before us, I believe it was last week, regarding all the great initiatives that are taking place at the vocational school. This is the alumni, I think it's the first of its kind, as far as I know, reaching out to the community on behalf of the vocational students and the school itself to improve the vocational education in our community. So I would urge anyone in the community that has a few extra dollars in their pocket, 7 p.m. to 11 p.m., April 13th, the Irish American Music Bingo, Mr. President. And I heard you're one of the singers there. Is that true?
I will be there.
Okay, so I just want to urge everyone to get out there, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilor Scarpelli.
If I can, thank you for Vice President Marks for bringing that up. I think it's a great event. I believe, so people understand, it's not for the school, but it's actually for the tools that, I believe that part of it is going for our students as they graduate to assist them in purchasing the tools they need in their trade. I think that's what Ms. Riccio said. I thought that was very important. And the other thing is that evening, right around the block is at John Brew is the HEMO fundraiser for the haircut, the buzz-off, where I've been banned. They won't allow me in there, but I suggest everybody there. There'd be 2 events that would be great to stop over and play a little musical bingo, and then see some great people over at John Brewer's for a great cause for the buzz-off. So, thank you.
I go to the buzz-off second.
That's what I say, because you want to look good at the first, right?
So Councilor Falco and Scarpelli, they don't get any. You don't get anything buzzed off.
We're gonna bring.
Councilor Knight.
Move approval, Mr. President.
Motion by Vice President Marks. All those in favor? Motion by Councilor Knight to revert back to regular business. Seconded by Councilor Scarpelli. All those in favor? 17-348, offered by Councilor Knight, be it resolved that the Medford City Council hold a moment of silence in memory of the late State Senator Charles E. Shannon, as April 5th, 2017 marks the 12th anniversary of his passing. Councilor Knight.
Mr. President, thank you very much. It's amazing how time flies. I remember walking into Senator Shannon's office when I was 19 years old and getting my first big boy job, as I like to call it, and I sat down at a desk next to your son, Richard, and I logged onto a computer that Councilor Marks used to sit at, and I began my career in public service, Mr. President, and through the relationship I had with Senator Shannon and the many moments of teaching that he allowed me to participate in through his guidance and his wisdom, I really miss him and bring this matter forward annually in his remembrance. Senator Shannon did a great deal of work for the city of Medford. He was a gentleman who, as they like to say, brought home the bacon to the district, and that type of representation is something that we need here in the city, and I was pleased to be a part of it in the Senator's office. He worked on a number of important issues that we're seeing come to fruition now, like the extension of the Green Line, marriage equality, just to name a few, Mr. President. So it's with a heavy heart that I bring this resolution forward this evening. However, it's important to me to remember somebody that's meant so much to me and so much to this community. So with that being said, I'd ask that my colleagues join me in endorsing the resolution.
And if I could reiterate that, Councilor, Senator Shannon, I first got involved with him when I was involved with youth hockey, and he's the one back in the early 90s when the state was going to tear down that LeConte rink. Senator Shannon stepped in and got the funding to keep that building open, and since then he became both a friend and a mentor to me and my family. So again, I commend him for that. We could all stand for a moment of silence. Petitions, presentations, and similar matters. 17-349, petition by John Storella, 20 Metcalf Street, Medford, to address the council with a template for the upcoming 2018 budget. Name and address for the record, please.
John Storella, residing at 20 Metcalf Street, here in Medford. Thank you for your patience, Mr. President. I do appreciate it. I did want to thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, all 6 councilors. I appreciate this opportunity to speak to you, and I want to thank you all. I want to say the title of my discourse tonight is A Template for the Upcoming 2018 Budget. In January 2016, the Medford City Council, under the leadership of Councilor John Falco, voted unanimously for a template for the 2017 budget. I had to look it up. According to the dictionary, template means a guide or a model. The template was never provided by the administration, so I am offering my anticipation of the fiscal year 2018 budget now. The City of Boston has already put forth its budget. Now, this is not so difficult to do because there are legal parameters for proposed budgets. Is it too early now to discuss a budget to be passed at the end of June? I don't think so. It is never too early to discuss the budget because the budget is the lifeblood of the people of Medford. In a material sense, of course, not in a spiritual sense. There are senior citizens on fixed income. There are handicapped young people. There are undereducated people. There are drug-addicted people, and so on. And the department heads all tell us of how they all need more money. The budget, as presented by the executive, will be passed automatically by a majority of this council in the last week of June. Why? Because that is what has happened every year for almost 30 years. This year will not be an exception. The council, as is well known, can shape the budget with a majority line item veto. But alas, it does not, forgetting that it has taken an oath to serve the people of Medford, not the administration. The council and the audience have been given a copy of the anticipated 2018 budget. This year's 2017 budget is $162 million. The anticipated 2018 budget, this is the budget that I am suggesting will be in effect, is $169 million. That is $7 million more, a 4.3% increase. How can a 4.3% increase be justified? Social Security payments to our seniors are flat or diminished. 10-year United States bonds pay only 2%. Local banks pay interest to savers as low as 0.01%. And inflation is only 1.3%. Yet, our city needs 4.3% to operate. How can we rationalize such an inequity? Now, look at the template for the 2018 budget. Look at how we arrive at these numbers. Some numbers are rounded numbers and some numbers are estimated because we do not have access to official numbers. But we will find that we are near accurate because they are based on historical numbers. Now, about this budget, if you look at it, this is how it happens every year. It's routine. You can predict what's going to happen because it happens this way every single year. And that's when Councilor Falco asked about it. He could have followed this here and anticipated the budget as it's going to be presented, by the way. We start out with the last levy, which was $104 million. Now, we add to that Proposition 2.5%, which is a law, by the way, which is another $2.5 million. Now, new growth I had to estimate. Usually, new growth comes to about $1 million a year. Now, I'm estimating for this year $1.5 million because we have a lot of building going on in the city. So we arrive at a levy limit of $108 million. Now, that levy limit of $180 million is what the homeowners pay. That's the real estate tax, $108 million. And that is what the people of Medford who own homes will be paying, $108 million. We have to add to that all the other taxes, like, for instance, local fees, state aid, school grants, return earnings, and the enterprise fund. I'm putting the enterprise fund in at $25 million. We discussed that earlier, as you remember, Councilor Marks. And the reason I'm putting that in is because every year it's about that. We have 24 million or 25 million or so. And because water and sewer rates are being raised, I'm estimating it at $25 million. Now we arrive at an available budget of $169 million. Remember that number, $169 million. Now, about this budget. This budget means tax increases in all our taxes. After all, the $7 million must come from somewhere. Only the City Council can reduce the budget as presented. But there are many items that cannot be legally reduced, like contracted compensation for our worthy employees, like principal and interest on borrowed money of bonds, like insurance, like pension contributions, like state assessments, like legal liabilities. So the only item, as far as I can see, that we can reduce is the cost of waste in government. Yes, waste. And there is waste. And it could add up to that $7 million that we were talking about. After all, it is now only 4% of the $169 million budget, not 4.3%. There is surely at least 4% waste in our government. The people of Medford expect honesty and truthfulness from our government. That requires an expenditure of time and energy. The people expect generosity and kindness from our government. That requires, well, the other was truthfulness, it required transparency. That was an error. But generosity and kindness require the expenditure of time and energy. The people expect humility from our government. That means no arrogance, no elitism. The people expect courage from our government. That means taking some personal risk. And finally, the people expect devotion to the people from our government. And that requires altruism. Honesty, generosity, humility, courage, devotion. Individuals who do not embrace those qualities should not be in government, because in the pact with government, the people surrender part of their most precious right in return for some service. That most precious right is their liberty. Marcus Aurelius, who died in 180 AD, said, "Life is short. That's all there is to say. Get what we can from the present, thoughtfully, justly." Now, the two most important words there are thoughtfully, justly. And he says, get what we can from the present, with thought and with justice. So, when we talk about, I've said this before to the council, they're probably tired of hearing it, but someone must expect responsibility for the increase in taxes constantly, year after year. Sorry to say this, I like all of you personally, believe it or not, but sometimes I regret your political actions. You can depend on me. I know you'll never need me, but if you do, I'm available. But I want to say that the increase in taxes is, unfortunately, the responsibility of the City Council. The City Council can do something about it, but it doesn't. Therefore, when taxes are increased on the poor, on the people who cannot afford it, on the people who find difficulty, not the prosperous people in Medford, there are many, they can afford it. If they want to pay more taxes, they should, but they should not impose it on the poor people. That's one thing that I'm sorry about. One of the flaws of human nature is that people want to control other people. They ought not do that. If you want to pay more taxes, go ahead. But don't compel other people to do the same thing. Thank you very much, councilors.
Thank you, Mr. Starella. Thank you. Name and address for the record, please.
Andrew Castanetti, Cushion Street. It's hard to follow Dr. Starella. He's so eloquent. And my education is not this so good, you know. From Tuss Park, I was educated at Woodstock, and I went to BU once. I did go to BU once, Boston University, I think it's called, but it was closed. However, what really fries my backside is this new growth, let's project it at past history, about $1.5 million. It is not, never has, been deducted from Prop 2.5 before you raise the real estate tax. If you did last year, the $1.7 million of new growth, deducted that first from the 2.5% of 100 million, 2.5 million, you would have had like $800,000 increase instead of $2, $3, $4 million. Approximately, I would say the real estate tax was ever going up like $400. It probably would have went up $80. Probably would have saved 80% on the tax increase. I don't know why it's not being done. Furthermore, I don't understand why we can't do what Somerville, Everett, Malden does, Boston, Brookline, and I believe Martha's Vineyard, to give the owner-occupied who live in their one home, doesn't matter if it's a condo, single, 2, 3 family, or 100 family, marauder home. Doesn't matter. They're all going to get the same 20% exemption. Actually, now I'm talking, since it's never been done here, 35%. to make it worthwhile. So no one's real estate tax will go up, even if you live in it, because the cap would be much higher than last year's projected 600,000 thereabouts. It'll go up to $1 million. And if it does go up, because you live in a house that's valued over the $1 million, it's going to be a minuscule increase. And don't forget, presently at 20%, if that was adopted, it would have been, I don't know, I'm losing track because it's highly unfair, and I can't understand it. And if you give the city more money, even on the side, I'm sure they'll take it. But Dr. Sorrella brings up some good points. I still understand why we don't use that new growth, because the new growth, we might as well not have it, because we don't need more congestion in East Ford, South Medford, because they don't help the real estate taxpayers that's been carrying the load for decades. They hurt us. Need more police, more fire, schools, school teachers, infrastructure, things of that nature. So where does that come from? We need more money. And the real estate tax, thanks to Barbara Anderson, rest her soul, is Prop 2.5. But like Dr. Starella says, last year's increase, or his projected increase for 2018, will be like over 4%. So that's a fallacy, also Prop 2.5. How much more can you tax the lower middle class? I really don't care too much for rich people. And I'm not really in the poor people's corner either. I'm for the lower middle class, because without the lower middle class, which is the majority, you're not going to have a society worth a damn. And I repeat, and it might be time for a second revolution. That's how this country was founded when we threw out the English. Give them a break. Please. Help the taxpayer, the average person. Please help them for a change. Just once.
Thank you, Mr. Castaneda. The records were passed to suspension of the rules by Councilor Marks, seconded by Councilor Dela Russo. Councilor Marks.
Thank you, Mr. President. There's a catch basin at 52 Dearborn Street that's sinking and needs to be repaired. So I would ask, in the interest of public safety, that that catch basin be repaired.
Move approval, Mr. President. Second.
Motion by Councilor Dela Russo, seconded by Councilor Knight. All those in favor? Aye. 7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Motion passes. Records were passed to Councilor Dela Russo.
I've inspected the records of the previous week's meeting, and to the best of my ability, find them to be free of error and move their approval.
You are found in order. Motion to adjourn by Councilor Dela Russo. All those in favor? Seconded by Councilor Knight. Meeting adjourned.